Hi, this is Priyanka and I welcome you all to Srijan Wednesday webinars. For those who are attending for the first time, this is a community initiative where Srijan will be hosting webinars every alternate Wednesday. We will have speakers from different domains who will talk about subjects like front-end technologies, UI UX, mobile apps, media, entrepreneurship, community building, digital marketing and many more. In today's webinar, our speaker will talk about 11 things that you don't know about cloud in the first 40 minutes, and the last 15 minutes will be for a Q&A round. I request you all to please take note of all your questions and type them in if you have any questions during the presentation, and our speaker will take them up towards the end of the webinar. I would now like to introduce our speaker for today's webinar. We have with us Rohit Luthra. Rohit is co-founder and director at Progression, a leading IT infrastructure service provider, offering a comprehensive range of cloud offerings, remote management services, co-location hosting, managed hosting, and DR services to its customers across the world. Rohit has over 24 years of experience, of which 18 years have been across various roles at Progression. Thank you so much for joining us in today's webinar, Rohit. Without wasting any more time, I think we should get started. So Rohit, over to you.
Thank you, Priyanka. Thank you everyone for joining in. So a bit of a disclaimer, and I think Priyanka did kind of introduce me saying that I do run a cloud company. As Progression, we have been in this business for quite some time. So just wanted to kind of put a disclaimer there. So a lot of these things that I'll end up saying will be possibly be biased by what our experience has been, what we do, and what it is we intend to do. So just to kind of give you a brief introduction, we started the cloud journey way back in 2008, though I must say that we were very tempted to start it in 2005 itself. Good in a way that we did not do it so early, because I think we would have spent a lot of time evangelizing about cloud, which we did for quite some time before we started selling it. So I think I presume that the audience is using some cloud, and you are definitely using cloud in some form or the other, maybe through email or maybe a Dropbox or maybe any service that you might be using on the internet. By some way or the other, you are using the cloud. So there's awareness about it. I think there are a couple of questions which need to be answered. A couple of questions that I think you should be asking your cloud provider. And the idea is to see that we can go beyond. So let me just show you this. Actually, interestingly, I mean, there have been a lot of jokes around this about as to what do that customers really think about the cloud. Funnily enough, some of these jokes are true. We come across this pretty much on a weekly basis with some customer conversation that we have. We had a recent conversation with a client, and they pose these kind of questions to us. And while it may be amusing to some of us, but I think it's still a long way to go. We also must keep in mind that the cloud is just been there for less than 10 years, of which, if you really see, the real traction has just picked up in the last 2 or 3 years, maybe 3 to 4 years in some other geographies. So I think there's a lot to learn. I'm learning myself on a daily basis, so is my team, and I think we need to kind of move forward. So the idea is to, this is an attempt to go beyond balloons and flakiness, and let's see as to how we go about it. So I guess this is what we already know about the cloud. It marks a shift from, running an infrastructure to using it as a utility. From owning it to, using it and paying for it when you use it and depending upon how much you use it. It is rapidly scalable. We all know that. It's rapidly scalable from, what it took months and weeks at least to do now can be brought down to hours and sometimes even minutes. While we say it's the future, I think A lot of it is already happening, and a lot will continue to happen in the coming quarters and coming years. We must also keep in mind that it's highly elastic, it's highly scalable, so things can really be deployed very quickly. It can be deployed, or it can be even redeployed for that matter. So depending upon how your business is scaling up, you can add servers very quickly, and if the business doesn't really take off the way you intended it to, you can actually scale it down as well. Security is an issue which we hear a lot about in the cloud. We will talk a little bit more about it as we go along, in this presentation. So I'll kind of take a dive into some of the things that we think you need to know about the cloud, or you might not know about the cloud. So number one, I think we need to figure out that all clouds are not equal. And that's possibly a reason as to why we see that the price really varies across different providers, and it also varies depending upon the kind of service that you end up using. So just to kind of take a bit of a dive here, I'll not take a deep dive in terms of the technology part. It's going to be more of a business presentation. So just to kind of talk about the underlying layer on which cloud happens is called a hypervisor. So you might have heard of VMware, you might have heard of Hyper-V, OpenStack, CloudStack, you might have heard it from Citrix as well. So these are some of the providers of hypervisors. So I think the question here is that, what is that you're running on these hypervisors? What are the kind of hypervisors that you're running it on? The kind of underlying hardware on which it runs. So is it something which is certified by the the vendors that you intend to run on the cloud? So say for example, if you intend to run SAP on the cloud, is it really certified by SAP in terms of the kind of hypervisor that you intend to run it on? So I think it's important for you to understand that what is that you're going in for. You need to understand as to the kind of infrastructure it's running it on, the kind of data center it's running it in. So you'll be surprised that some of the so-called clouds are running out of somebody's home or some dingy basement, or is it really running out of a state-of-the-art data center where you're ensuring that the infrastructure is really up and running. It's kind of designed for 24/7 operations. And I think these are some of the things we will also explore as we go along in this presentation. But I think do keep in mind that all clouds are not equal. Take a deep dive into pricing, as it happens, as it appears in front of you, and we'll talk a little bit more about the pricing, I think, in the next few slides as well. I think very important point is all clouds are not managed. What do we mean by that? I mean, is there proactive monitoring happening across different, it may be environment in the data center, it could be, I'm talking about temperatures, I'm talking about humidity, I'm talking about, the CPU of your virtual machine, or it's the memory, or in many cases you might be interested in finding out what are the IOPS that, especially in case of data intensive applications, are they being managed? Is somebody looking at them and working proactively on it to keep your business up and running? So I think very important for you to figure out as to, are you going to do it yourself? Are you going to manage it yourself, or do you expect your service provider to manage it for you? Just to kind of make a case in point here, some of the leading cloud providers, when you look at them, you look at the pricing, you'll be surprised that not even monitoring is included in that. So is it something that you will be investing in terms of the tools that which need to be put in place, the people, the automations which have to be put in place, the notifications, and so on and so forth. Just to make a point here, sometimes it can cost you at least 4 to 5 times of the server that you might have signed up for the moment you go in for even monitoring, and in some cases management. Management can become even far much more expensive than even 4 to 5 times of what you end up paying. So do keep this in mind, when you're signing up for, your cloud provider, when you're choosing as to whom you're going to host with. There's another issue of backups. Are backups really included? I have seen personally that, a lot of low-cost providers of cloud services do not include backup as part of their standard offering. And when you look at the backup cost, you'll be surprised that sometimes it ends up being equal to or even more than the cost of the virtual machine that you may be setting up there. The second point is, even if the backup is there, is it managed? Backups do fail. Is it a real person looking at those failures and making sure that those backups happen? Are you alerted on the on the failures which happen? So it's extremely important for you to look at that. What is it you're signing for? And are you signing for a DIY cloud? You're going to do everything yourself, or is it a managed service that you're looking at? And managed services could mean OS management, it could mean databases management, it could mean even application management. So I think it's like, you choose the toppings of what is that you need. Don't presume that you're getting everything. I think it's important for you to kind of take a deep dive and try and figure out as to what is that I am getting from my service provider. Are they willing to do any restoration drills for you? Some point in time, your data might go corrupt. There will be human errors. There will be, errors in patches which get applied, and there are other, errors which are possibly beyond your control. Do a drill with them. See that you can actually simulate a possibility of restoring what you thought you might lose at some point in time. Yeah, so we will again get into the SLA part a little more. But do check very, very carefully what you are signing for. I think it's important. It's your business end of the day. It's important for you to make sure that it's up and running the way you want it to run. And therefore, if you find something which is not there in the SLA, ask for it. You'll be surprised that your service provider might be willing to offer that. And in case they do not have the capability to offer that, maybe you need to look elsewhere and figure out as to who the best cloud provider for you is. This is an interesting point, when you talk about the fact that clouds are not as transparent as you think they might be. Most of the cloud service providers, the leading one, will give you calculators. Do run the calculators, with things like monitoring for everything, management for some of the things that you may be looking at. And you might be surprised in terms of what you thought the initial price would be. Just a point that I made earlier as well. But I thought I'll just kind of build upon this, that it's not really as transparent as you think it should be, or it might be. Just to make a case in point again here, say for example, if you're running large databases or you're running a large number of transactions, you might have very high IOPS needs. And the basic server that you get from the cloud service provider along with a certain amount of storage may or may not be able to serve that. In most cases, it will not be able to serve that. And when you actually look for the kind of IOPS that you want, and you need to sign up for that, you might be in for a surprise. The costs really, really scale out, and something that you were not prepared for initially. So I think it's important to figure out. This is actually building on the last point, but I think transparency versus manageability are very, very different issues. Do look at them very, very, very carefully, before you sign up. So get a very, very clear picture of, what is it you need. Do your homework extremely well. Ask a lot of questions. Speak to the cloud service provider. Speak to your friends who have been hosting in the cloud. What have been their learnings? Speak to your peers. You'll be surprised even competition is willing to talk. Because you're all in the same boat. When you're actually sitting on the customer side. So it's extremely important for you to understand as to what is that you will get. Just to kind of build up upon another small point, when you're looking at a site, let's say you're launching SaaS for your customers, and it might happen that as the business grows, you will find that you might not be able to monitor and manage it yourself. So be prepared as to what these costs can be for you so that you're not in for a nasty surprise. We'll move on to the next point. And this is a very, very important point. I think security is something that we all are concerned about. Most of us believe that the cloud is not secure. The short answer is yes and no. It can be very secure and it can be extremely insecure. So just to kind of build upon some of these points, number one, it will possibly be more secure than running, on-premise infrastructure. And why do I say that? As cloud service providers, we are like, banks and security companies to our clients. This is our core business, which means that we have to make sure that clients feel extremely secure hosting with us. So we put the best of technologies in place. We put the best processes and practices in place. We even make sure that we have the right kind of certifications, both for people within the organization as well as organization as a whole. So I think it's extremely, extremely critical for us, as service providers to ensure that, we offer you the best. However, not all cloud service providers will necessarily offer security as a bundled in service. What do I mean by that? You may need to look at, say for example, in some cloud providers cases, the fact that you will need to put the firewall yourself, you will need to put the IPS or the intrusion prevention system yourself, or if it's a VPN, you need to make sure that you put in you buy another, virtual server and you implement VPN on that, or you buy another service from them. So be very, very careful as to, the kind of security service that you're getting, either as bundled or paid for. The problem with many of these paid for services, especially when they're not bundled in, is the fact that it ends up being a DIY case. And not all organizations are capable of, doing it themselves. And that's the whole idea. If I knew how to do it, I might not be even willing to move to the cloud. I think there's another very, very important consideration that you have to keep in mind. The biggest security threats come from employees, or so it's more of a threat from inside as opposed to the outside. The fact is that the fact that you're on the internet is the fact that you're exposed. And today I don't think any one of us can really say that we're not on the internet. You might not end up using the internet, but the fact is somebody's connected to you on the internet. So do keep that in mind, that you are exposed no matter what. I'll just take an example. One of our clients about 6 months ago suspected that one of their, we host about close to 1,000 email accounts of theirs, and they suspected that one of their accounts was being compromised. It was not being hacked. The account was not hacked. It was just that they felt that one of their ex-employees and a senior ex-employee still possibly has the credentials and was able to log in and find out as to what is happening. And they wanted us to do a scan across our networks and our servers to tell them that if this is true. The bad news is this. Yes, it was happening. It was happening for about 5 or 6 days since the client intimated us, 5 to 6 days before the client intimated us, it was happening. But what we could do was we could go back to the client and tell them as to, where did these threats happen from, which were the IPs, what was the time of the day or night when it was happening. And they had enough evidence, to take that and take some action against, the concerned person. I don't think most organizations today will be able to do it themselves. All the things that I've told you. It takes a lot of expertise. It takes a lot of capability, it takes a lot of systems being in place for one to do this. Just to kind of extend that point a bit, most organizations feel that if they have a firewall in place, that they are secure. That is not. Let me give you a not so polite answer. It is not at all true. Putting a firewall doesn't make you secure. I think it's a lot beyond putting a firewall. It talks about what are the kind of policies that you have, or what are the standard procedures that you have in place, in case there's a vulnerability that you come across. So very, very important for you to figure out, whom you're hosting with, what are the kind of capabilities that they have, and look at the trade-off in terms of building those capabilities in-house versus getting them from a service provider who possibly has more expertise. But having said that, do your due diligence. Find out what is the capabilities that they have. What is that they have installed? Who has access to what? How do they access it? I mentioned this earlier as well, but I just wanted to re-emphasize. Look at the certifications and practices, the security architecture that they have. Also ask about the kind of vulnerabilities which have happened. And if you find that your cloud service provider is too cagey about it, too cagey to talk about it, you might be a little concerned on that account. I'm not asking them to share as to what are the specific vulnerabilities, what happened. But if somebody turns around and says, you know what, there was no vulnerability in the last few weeks or few months, I can definitely tell you that is so untrue. Do keep that in mind, and I think you'll be able to make a better choice. We'll move on from here. So, like I said, security is something which is there and yet not there. I can go on talking about it, but there's some other points to cover as well. But do spend time on this to make sure that what you're getting is something that you really wanted. This is an interesting point. Clouds will be increasingly local. We like to think that once you're on the internet, it's all global. So I don't know if you look at today's Economic Times, it mentions about the fact that Microsoft is considering setting up a data center in India. Why do you think they need to do that? The cost structures in India are not really favorable for setting up data centers. Our energy costs are high. Most of the country is hot. Real estate is more expensive than in the West, and so on and so forth. I think the biggest driver here is government regulations. The biggest driver here is the concern for privacy. Remember Snowden? I'll just kind of deviate a bit to make a point here. Last year, when we heard about Snowden and the kind of effect it created in the markets, we got a lot of queries to host email for customers who are based out of the Western markets. We were a little surprised, but the moment we started to correlate and find out as to what's happening, and we could correlate it to the fact that this is what we call the Snowden effect. People were concerned about security. They were concerned about the fact that some of the geographies that they host in may not be necessarily secure in terms of their data and the kind of confidentiality that they need to maintain. So the biggest drivers are privacy, biggest drivers are government regulations. Indian government has notified all its departments to remove email accounts from wherever they may be hosting outside a Gmail or a Yahoo or a Hotmail and so on and so forth. This is important. So I think this is going to drive the fact that clouds will be increasingly local. Latency is another issue. While many of the web apps guys out here in the audience may feel that's not so much of an issue when you look at a content delivery network, but it really is when you're looking at application hosting specifically. Application host, when let's say you're running your SAP in the cloud and let's say 90% of your users are based out of India, I think it makes sense to host it out of India. Or if you're, let's say 80% of your, people who access the SAP servers are based out of, let's say Africa, and for lack of, let's say, good infrastructure in Africa, you may be looking at markets, where the latencies are extremely low. So I think latency will continue to be a driver no matter what. I think another point that I would like to make is that latency is something we tend to underestimate in terms of performance, and it's possibly the much bigger factor as opposed to the the internet speed that you may have. So if your latency is, let's say, running into 10 or 20 milliseconds versus hosting out of a place which is running into 200 to 300 milliseconds, you'll be surprised that on a connection which is half of what it is, you'll get a far better performance on a 10 to 20 millisecond network. You get like a near LAN-like performance when you're hosting out of low latency networks. Just to kind of build upon the point, other than Microsoft, we are aware that Amazon is looking at setting up India presence, and so have been many others. So this is something you might want to remember. Also keep in mind that a lot of the BFSI customers can't really take their data out of the country. So if you are one of the developers who are working in the BFSI space, or you yourself are linked to the BFSI space in some way or the other, think carefully as to where do you have to host, because it might happen that today they may not be asking you too many questions, but maybe in times to come they'll be concerned, and you may lose out on their business if you do not host out of India, or out of the country that those BFSI customers are based out of. So if you have customers based out of, let's say, Europe, I think you need to examine carefully as to where you need to host. Yeah. Defense is another very important area. If you have customers who are defense or related to the defense industry, be careful as to where it is that you choose to host, and how you will run that. R&D is another space. R&D organizations are very sensitive about where their data is moving. So say, for example, there's an interesting example. So let's say if my primary server runs out of India, but my backup happens in the US, you might be concerned. You might, and I think you should be concerned about that. Because while there is no so-called quote-unquote live data running on it, but somebody may have access to that data sitting out of some geography. So we'll move on from here. Availability is, I think, a very important point. Availability, or uptime, as we call it. So I just thought I'd spend a minute on this jargon of tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 data centers. I think it's important, but just to kind of illustrate that, a tier 3 data center is expected to promise you 99.9982% uptime, which translates to less than 1.6 hours of downtime per year. It's a difficult business. I must add here that running a data center is a tough business. There's so many things that you need to take care of, especially in this country. And power is an issue. The quality of power is such an issue. But having said that, anywhere in the world, promises of 100% uptime and 5 nines, in our opinion, are unrealistic. As standalone virtual machines or standalone hosted servers. If your business is something which needs those kind of uptimes, I think you would need to consider hosting them across different geographies, across different data centers. When I say different geographies, I don't mean geographies as in different countries, but if you're hosting something out of north, you might want to do a replication of that service running out of the west or the south of India. So geo clusters is something that you need to look at for high availability. If your business is something that just cannot afford even a minute's downtime. Having said that, yesterday I logged into my bank and I found 503 service. So 503 message, and most of you who are in that space would realize that the service is temporarily unavailable. And I do know, I was a little concerned that is the bank going bankrupt, that everybody's trying to draw their money out, but I don't think that was the case. It did come up in I think another half an hour or so of that. But the point I'm making is that nearly most businesses will be affected at some point in time or the other. So be careful as to what is that you're getting, what is that you have signed for. So just to kind of extend that point a bit, figure out as to how is your uptime calculated. So somebody, just to illustrate that, somebody may be guaranteeing you, let's say, 99.9% uptime. What does it mean? So on a yearly basis, this would translate to about 3.65 days of downtime. However, on a monthly basis, this would translate into 7.2 hours of downtime, right? So look at, 0.72 hours of downtime on a monthly basis. So if we try and figure out as to how is uptime calculated by your service providers. So without naming one of the biggest providers in the world, they calculate it on a rolling basis, which means that the last time you had your downtime, the clock is reset and they start calculating it from there on. Which means that if you had a downtime 3 weeks ago, which lasted 15 minutes or 20 minutes, and the next cycle would have started from there on. So if you had another 1 hour of downtime in the next cycle, they will not necessarily compensate you in any form whatsoever, because they are doing it on a rolling basis. Some of your service providers may be calculating it on an annual basis. Some of them might be doing on a half-yearly or a quarterly basis. So do look in the fine print, or do ask this question as bluntly as possible and ask them to give this to you in writing, and as to what is the uptime that I'm getting, and what is the basis of the calculation of that uptime. We'll move on to point number 7, which is about support. We spoke about manageability earlier. I think it's a very, very important point which is related to support. So somebody might turn around and say, my cloud is completely supported. Figure it out, find out their process. Do you have to go through a long, winding IVR call before you land at the help desk? Do they actually have a help desk on the web where you can actually log in a ticket and expect a phone call? Or is it your responsibility to go back to them? Or is it only email support? It may happen that you're in a geography where you don't have internet connectivity at that point in time, but you are aware that some of your servers are affected. Can they reach out to you? Because I do know of service providers across the world who will turn around and say, we will only give you email or chat support, which is great as long as you have the internet. But sometimes it does happen that we don't have the internet, and I should be able to pick up the phone and reach out to somebody human. Can I actually have an account manager? I think that's, if you're looking at a certain number of servers, you're looking at giving a certain amount of business to your service provider. I think it's important to ask for a dedicated account manager for yourself. I think what is important here is also ask these questions as to, how do they support you? What is the process? Do they go about supporting you even proactively without you knowing it? Because let me tell you, a lot of things are happening in the network all the time, and it may be across a network, it may be happening on certain storage, it may be happening on compute, it may be on the OS, the physical infrastructure. Is somebody actually doing something about it, proactively monitoring it and managing it? Or are you going to be the first customer who will be informing them that something is down? So I think it's extremely important for you to figure out as to how do they go about it? Who is responsible for support and maintenance of your instances, your virtual machines? Is there a single point of responsibility? I think that's very, very, very important. We can't emphasize less upon that, because you might have come across situations where a lot of finger pointing happens, that somebody will say that this is not my problem, this is the problem of the connectivity provider, or this is a problem of somebody else, and so on and so forth. So I think it's important to also see that that does your service provider have skills and capabilities across different kind of technologies? Because let me tell you, the world will continue to be heterogeneous, which means that there will be different platforms, there will be different kind of applications, they're not going to become standardized overnight. And therefore, you need somebody who has capabilities across various platforms, Windows, Linux, different flavors of Unix, and so on. So I think it's extremely, extremely critical for you to figure out as to what is the kind of support that you can expect from your service provider. However, there may be organizations who feel that they have very, very strong skills on what they're building, on the stack they're building, and they might not need support beyond, let's say, the infrastructure, which means the compute, storage, security, and so on and so forth. Everything else above that is something that they will like to take care about, and I think that's perfectly okay. So look for a service provider who will cover you up to the extent you want to be covered, and you build them on from there. So, just to kind of sum it up, I think cloud is all about integrating multiple components. I think possibly we should have spent a minute in terms of defining as to what the cloud is, but I did not want to do it because it can be highly controversial. But the way we would like to describe it is that, you're actually bringing together a lot of components, maybe, starting from compute to memory, to the different kind of storages. So it's essentially, it's about abstraction of various resources that we end up using and making sure that it's served as a utility as opposed to an infrastructure. So therefore, it is important that somebody should have the ability to support all these kind of different building blocks and make sure that you get what you think you have signed up for. We'll move on from here to the next point, which is kind of build upon the previous point, that should you not be happy with your CSP or any service provider for that matter, it could also be a SaaS provider. Can you do that? This short answer is yes, you can do that. But it's not necessarily easy, especially as your data builds up, it grows. We have clients who are hosting tens of terabytes of storage with us. It becomes increasingly difficult when you're looking at moving from one service provider to another. Think very carefully when you are using the SaaS model, because you possibly don't even have the root access to your data. You may be able to export it in terms of CSV files or Excel files or PDF files, but that is not really data the way you want it. Again, without naming, I know of enough providers where you're actually logged in for life because you may not ever have access to the raw data the way you need it, which means that you have to go about reconstructing it, and which can be I would not say it's impossible, but it's extremely, extremely difficult for you to do that. I think one of the things which will change this as we go along is about standards. When all different cloud service providers across the globe agree upon a certain standard, which means that so say for example, our cloud is primarily based on VMware. So there are some open standards as well as some proprietary standards on which I can cut an image and share with my clients, which we do. However, that may or may not be portable across another cloud. So it's not only about the data, it's also about the instance. So just because it makes your job significantly easier when you're actually taking an instance as opposed to data. Standardization, I think, becomes even more critical, because I don't think it's only about changing my cloud service provider or SaaS provider. It is also about the fact that I also need to integrate my on-premise infrastructure with what I intend to host in the cloud, which means that we're talking about a hybrid cloud kind of a scenario, or it may be across different cloud providers. So standardization will make this simpler and easier as we go along. This is an important point about licensing. This is a tricky one, especially if you're working with technologies that you need to pay for licensing. Especially, let's say, I'll take the example of Microsoft here. Let's say you have chosen to move your infrastructure onto the cloud. So there'll be enough providers who will say, yes, we have Windows hosting available, we have Microsoft SQL standard hosting available, and they take a charge for that. But what happens to the licenses that you already own? Can you actually take them into the cloud? Not necessarily. So please look at this very, very carefully when you're signing up with the cloud service provider. Does your cloud service provider allow you mobility, licensing mobility onto their cloud and save you a lot of money in the long run? Another important point is what happens, let me take an example here. So let's say you have an in-house or a standardized ERP running in the cloud now, and you have about close to, let's say, 50 users coming to it. You have 50 authorized users on that. What do you think happens from the licensing front when you need to, let's say, export something onto an Excel as a report? You might be in for a surprise. You might think it's only one license of Excel which is required. Let's say, but it might happen that you actually need 50 licenses of Excel because Microsoft may be counting licensing very, very differently from the way you think they should be doing. The fact is that you already may be having 50 licenses of Excel across all these users who are running it on their laptops or workstations, but Microsoft licensing policy may or may not allow that to seamlessly kind of move it up and down. So be a little careful here. So evaluate your, I think, platform of choice in terms of databases, applications, productivity tools, and whatever else. Having said that, I think if you're a greenfield project, you're a startup, I think it's a simpler way to go. You may want to go all the way into the cloud and not have the headache of buying licensing as well as I think licensing compliance as you grow becomes increasingly a very, very tough issue to handle. So I think this is something you have to be extremely, extremely careful about. Lastly, it's a delivery model. Sorry, not lastly, the second last point. I think it's more of a delivery model as opposed to a technology. I think we would all agree that it's a disruptor. It's a game changer in the way we deliver IT, the way we consume IT today. So there's no question about that. It is evolved out of technologies which have been there in place for a very, very long time. I think largely one of the biggest drivers for progression to get into this business was the fact that it creates optimal use of IT. We were always extremely frustrated about looking at our clients' infrastructure and seeing that they end up only using 20% at the most of their compute resources, or they run out of resources far much more quickly than they thought they would. So I think it's something which excites us that it creates so much of optimization in the system. So it is truly actually green in every sense of the word. From a delivery perspective, if you look at it, we actually wrote a blog some months ago about cloud shoring. And there's a term that we kind of created in one of the conversations, and we said, it's not about onshoring or offshoring or nearshoring anymore. And we are speaking to some of our clients, and they are already facing this issue. Traditionally, they have been software delivery companies with offices across the world, with teams which sit out of Americas, Europe, as well as a large delivery team based out of India. I'm not saying that those teams will disappear, but the way you deliver, now the clients expect that the delivery actually happens on a common platform that they all have access to. It is not about that the platform is running out of their setup or it's running out of the the software provider setup. It's about a common platform that they can all be looking together at on a live basis. So I think it's a major paradigm shift in terms of how IT is getting delivered as well as consumed. Very important point. I think we are also seeing that cloud is kind of creating opportunities for line of business applications like ERP, where or applications where you need a very high level of security, So it is actually, that's a scenario where, you know, clients are looking at extending their LAN as opposed to be purely being in the cloud, not knowing where they are. So that's another delivery model which has emerged out of you know, the cloud kind of taking shape in the last, I would say, 3 to 4 years. So we're seeing increasingly a lot of our customers wanting to move their critical applications onto what we would like to call either private or a virtual private cloud, as the case might be. So it's interesting to remember that, you know, it's a disruptor. Definitely it is. I think many of you must be facing that, and I think in the coming years it's going to be even more exciting in terms of the kind of applications which will move on to the cloud. I don't think I can even predict the kind of stuff which will move on to the cloud. And lastly, I think it's not, cloud as a concept is definitely not new. We're talking about, you know, 40 years or more of it being there. It may have been called time sharing in the, you know, in the days of mainframes, or large Unix boxes. You know, those VMs still continue on Unix boxes and Unix platforms, and it's exciting that, you know, when we show it to our clients that this is what you can do with it, and you may or may not realize that you've been doing a lot with it in the past, and it is the same concept. But yes, what have been the key drivers? I think it's internet connectivity, the fact that you have cheaper, more available, more reliable connectivity being in place. I think this is one of the biggest drivers for the cloud to happen the way it is happening now. Mobility, I think I'm possibly a little too old for it, but when I see, you know, a lot of young people, the way they use internet, I don't think that most of them even use their laptops, or I think desktops are pretty much gone now. The way they use the mobile phone and other such devices, I think is something which is making the cloud happen in such a big way. I don't think we can thank the World Wide Web any less. I think the whole paradigm shift happened about, you know, close to 20 years ago, just over 20 years ago, when the World Wide Web came into place. And I think that's what has been possibly been, you know, the alpha version of cloud computing. And so it's taken another 15 years for it to become a reality, and here it is. With this, I'd like to thank you all for being here, taking time out of, you know, middle of the day and spending time listening to me. I'll be more than happy to take any questions, and in the event, you know, I can't answer any questions at this point in time, I, along with my team, will be more than happy to take it offline and come back to you. Thank you so much, and Priyanka, I hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, Rohit. I am pretty sure everybody found your presentation very interesting, and thank you for sharing these insightful facts with us. I'm sure everybody could be able to implement these learnings better by making a wiser choice when they're going for cloud from now on. Moving on, we are going to start off with our live question answer round. I'm sure you guys have questions, so please type in your questions in the chat box below, or you can speak out your questions using your microphone, and for that case, you will have to press the raise hand button on your control panel to ask your question directly from Rohit. So I already have a few questions. I'm going to start off by taking our first question. One of the audience wants to know, how do you dimension for space and configuration between a cloud-based solution and on-premise solution? It would have been better to show a comparison and substantiate. So it would be great, Rohit, if you can give an overall comparison between the two.
I'd just like to repeat that once again, if you don't mind, Priyanka, just to make sure that I've got it right.
Sure. Our audience would like to know, how do you dimension for space or configuration between a cloud-based solution and an on-premise solution?
Did you say dimension?
Yes.
I'm not very sure as to what the question means, but let me try and show you something and see if it makes sense. Just allow me a few seconds, please. Yeah, so I thought I'll just kind of take this slide towards the end, and I think it kind of makes an interesting point on about on-premise versus in the cloud. So on the extreme left, as you can see, it says traditional on-premise, and these are the various blocks for you to enjoy pizza end of the day. And so we're talking about infrastructure as a service, where we're talking about cheese toppings, tomato sauce, and pizza dough as some of the ingredients that you provide when you're providing infrastructure as a service. And on the extreme right is software as a service, where the service provider is responsible for everything. So I don't know if I've been able to answer the question. I'll be happy to take this offline, Priyanka, and come back with a a detailed mail response.
All right. So basically, Ram wanted to know if you can give an overall comparison between cloud-based solution and on-premise solution.
So it's a kind of a difficult question to answer very generically, but just to kind of look at let's look at the various blocks. So when you're looking at on-premise, I think one of the things that you need to look at is that does your infrastructure, I'm talking about the physical infrastructure, allow for 24/7 operations, number one. I think we'll be able to answer this better if we have an idea of the kind of, the application landscape that we're talking about. But having said that, I will attempt, a generic answer, a generic kind of an answer. So looking at first the physical infrastructure, does the physical infrastructure allow for 24/7 operations, which means that, right from having generators in place and redundancies in place in terms of power, also ensuring that it's running middle of the night when the power goes out, and also trying to figure out as to what your costs are of doing it in-house, on-premise. I think the next thing that you need to look at is the infrastructure that you buy. I'm talking about the IT infrastructure that you buy. So first thing, I think from the network point of view, you need to look at your switches, your routers, your firewalls and intrusion prevention systems that you need to put in place before you can actually start rolling out your application. Again, look in terms of the capabilities that you have in-house. Can you do it yourself? Do you have some of this infrastructure already in place? You may think that you will be isolated from the internet, but I doubt that. You will have employees who are traveling. So unless, like I said, you are a defense organization or an organization which is extremely cagey about opening up anything, is a different scenario. But like I said, I'll give more of a generic answer here. So you